Kitchens are full of really interesting materials and finishes. So we're going to take a look at how to render some of these. And the equipment that you're going to need are some cartridge papers to put underneath to absorb your ink, because you know when we're working on bond paper that the ink soaks through and gets underneath. We're going to need some sort of white pen. You can use your white gel pen. I love these. These are the Pentel correction pens. They give out a lot of ink. That's what I love about them. You need a black color pencil, your white Prismacolor pencil. This is just a version of the Prismacolor pencil. It's a Prismacolor art stick, and it's just one big chunk of pencil, soft white pencil crayon. Really good to have. And they're maybe $1.50 or so. They're sold separately. It's a nice thing to have. I just sharpen it in my pencil sharpener or with a knife, but they come as a square. And your colorless blender, your 1 gray, your 1 cool gray, your 3 cool gray, your 5, your 7, and the black this time, and your pencil sharpener. You need to keep your pencils very sharp. What we're going to take a look at now is how to render your wall with colored pencil. What you'll need is your black colored pencil, white colored pencil. This is my white colored pencil from Prismacolor as well, only it's a big chunk. It's called an art stick. These are excellent to have. You also need an eraser. This is a kneaded eraser. They're really the best for this job, but a white eraser will work as well. And these, to use them, you get them warm in your hand and then you knead it with your fingers and keeping it warm. And the beauty of it is that it will pick up gently, not a big heavy swipe like this can sometimes do. It'll just kind of pick up a little bit at a time so you can lighten things easily rather than swiping out a whole area. So for example, we might want to go back and retrieve some of our light on our lightest wall, and this would be great for doing that. You can cut off larger chunks. It just depends on your preference for that. To start, we're going to need our knife, tissue, something soft, a soft cloth or a soft tissue, and we'll start aiming at our wall. And the plan is for this to be our lighter wall, not a lot lighter, but lighter, and this will be our darker corner, our darker wall. It's always important to have that contrast. It happens, actually, if you look around, it happens. Now I'm going to be brave and do this shaving right on my paper, and I'm conscious that this is my light wall, so I don't want too many shavings. And then you take your tissue and wrap it around your finger and you start. Now I'm going to not worry too much. I'm not pressing too hard. I don't want this to go right into the fiber of the paper. I'm trying to avoid the lights, but if I go over them, that's not a problem. I can go back and lighten that, either with my white pencil or eraser. I can erase it out. So this is my lightest wall. And as you see, I had very few shavings, but I'm managing to get a value here. I hope you can see that. I'm managing to get a value. Now it's impossible not to go over some of these things that are already there, but I'm not too worried about that. So just don't press too hard. And you don't want lumps. I think circular motions help to work out the lumps. And I'm trying to go a little lighter as I go over to the other side. I think I already mentioned that if you're working on a colored rendering, you can use your colored pencils in this same way. It just helps to make an even gradation of color or value. And we've got our hatching there, so we don't have to darken up our shadows. I think that's one of the problems that everyone is having, is just making the walls too dark or too spotty, spot rendering rather than thinking of the direction the rendering is going in, and that you should be moving from dark to light or light to dark rather than filling it all in. So now I can go about this. Now this, I'm aware, is my darker wall, so but I'm still taking care. I'm going to do it gradually. I don't want to do it get dark all at once, because it isn't really a dark wall. It's not a, and it does have some light. We've got our penumbra, so it does have some light. I'm thinking the backsplash is going to be rendered so with the markers, so I'm not touching that at all. And there's where the light is washing the wall from the pot lights above. So I'm just concerned with the wall. And if this isn't darker than my other edge, then I don't worry about that too much. It's a little darker here by doing this. Here I can press, because this is the corner. I can pick up a couple more scraps and go a little darker here, because this is my corner after all. And then you have to shake your paper afterwards so you get all of these crumbs off of it. Now, the other way to do that is if you have a slender eraser like this, you can put your erasing shield here, because there light gathers at corners, you recall, so we can go in and pull out that corner. We can go in and pull out a little bit here on this edge. And all of this lends itself toward making things look more real, but quickly. You don't have to worry. I'm going to show you a little bit the kneaded eraser. It's very subtle, but it just sweeps across and just ever so softly lightens that up for me. And this part, don't forget our little architectural detail. It's facing the same way as this wall, so I'm going to go in and lighten that up with my eraser. And I don't mind that I went a little bit outside, because that is an edge, and light gathers at edges, you know. So, and I've got this, I can go in and lighten this up. The kneaded eraser would have been better there, but this will work too. And I don't think I've done enough over here, so I'll go back. So you're constantly reassessing, but the reassuring thing is that you have things to think about. You have methods of determining whether this is going the right direction or not. And the determinant in this case is that I want this to be a darker wall. It's the window wall. That's usually the darker wall. You'll see if you look around you, that's the darker wall in the room, the window wall. And I want this to be getting lighter, darker over here in the corner, my darkest area, and then getting lighter as it goes over this way. Because I don't want the focus over here. This, as you recall, is around my focal area, so, and then you just pick up whatever you need to get you over to the other side. And then you begin to lighten up as you get to the areas that are less of a focus for us. You can put this in again any place that you erase too much or smudge too much, or you can take it out and put it back in. I'm hoping that this little bit of flexibility will help you. Now this is facing the same way as this, so I've got to go in there and be a little darker. And it might be helpful to use a little bit of paper. This is always something you can do. Use a little bit of paper to help you get that in a little bit of dark. Doesn't take much before it fills all in too quickly. Now our ceiling, we want to attach this hood. We don't want any floaters out there, so we've got to figure out our direction for that. And I would swing this around the way I would a marker, trying to include that. Don't want your ceiling to be too dark, but we've got lights up there, so they're not going to look light unless they're playing against something that's darker. So I'll just gather this up and start here past my, this is a window, remember, darker where the windows are, so this sets that up. And I want to start planning now to include that hood. So I'm thinking about how I can maybe go this way and this way and this way to include that hood. While I'm talking, I'm blowing all the little things around and they're getting lost. And don't worry about the hood, you can go back and erase. You have to be gentle on your paper when you're erasing. You can't be too rough on it. And now I'm starting to try to figure out how I'm going to echo that penumbra when I get out this far. Easier to do this way than having to do it in the markers, I know, for some, because it's the markers dry so quickly. And there are little flaws in the paper too, so you've got to be prepared for that, and there is something we can do about that. Some parts of it receive, especially this bond paper, some parts of it receive the pencil more readily than others, so we've got a little thing we can do about that too. And then I should have some down this wall too. I'm going to put that shadow in with marker though, so I don't have to worry too much about that. And you just go in and see. And don't forget too, you're going to have marker there as well. And it doesn't look too bad. I think they're a little bit different. This is a little warmer than that, but it's okay. It'll work. Once we get it all rendered, it'll work. And then you just go back and clean up any areas that got pencil on it that you didn't want to have. And you can use your erasing shield if you want to get crisp edges. And this is where your drafting brush is very helpful, especially for this, because you can get rid of the crumbs without damaging anything else. And we're going to need a border around this so that it looks finished. And lastly, what you might want to do to make it look smooth, if you were unable to get it to look smooth, or if you want to cool it down, adding white to any color, as you know, will cool it down. So this might make it match the markers a little more. It's never going to. It's always going to be a little warm, but it might help to cool it down. But don't put pencil crayon anywhere you're going to put marker later, because it will not work well with your markers. The markers will enliven it and you'll get wax in your nibs. These are wax-based pencil crayons, and the others, the polychromos, are oil-based, so that would be even worse. So be careful. And just adding a little there. So this is another option for you if you want to give this a whirl, and it might work out better for you in terms of getting a nice soft transition on your wall. I'd like to start with some marble. That's a very common thing to find in a kitchen. We're going to look at each of these materials in terms of what they would look like in the light and the halftone and the shadow. For this I'm going to need my white pencil crayon, my black pencil crayon, the number 1, the 3, and the 5. We'll start with our 1 and the 3, of course, and we'll work in our light value first. So I'm going to just make some vertical strokes, and this is how you should map this in when you render it in your rendering as well. That's exactly how you would do it. And while that's wet, I'm going to add in a few strokes of reflection with my number 3 marker. And you space them apart and make some together thicker and some further away a little thinner. It's going to be darker, so I'll go with mostly my 3. And it's better if you don't overlap these. And while it's wet, I'm going to put in some 5. And if this were an edge, woo, this is wet, I would put the 5 exactly where that began. This is a pretty big contrast, something that everyone's been telling me about their markers. So I'm going to put in a little more. Now don't worry if this escapes the edges. That doesn't matter. Don't worry about that. And here we're going 5 and 7 for the real shadowy parts of our drawing. You do need fresh markers when you're rendering. If they're dry, they do dry out. When you think about it, they are alcohol based, and alcohol evaporates. So when it does, there isn't a vehicle to move the pigment, and the gray pigment is no longer available to you. So you have to buy some more. And if you do have to buy some more, I would recommend, see, I'm just going back with the 5 now. I found the 7 was a little too contrasty. So you do want a little bit of a smooth transition. My preference in markers are these Prismacolor Premier markers. I love this nib. I can do anything with that nib. It's soft and malleable. It's not stiff. So if you're going to change, if your markers are dry and you're looking maybe to look at a brand that's always available, the touch ones, they're not always available, but these are. They don't have as large an inkwell as the touch ones, so they do run out a little faster, but I think they're just better overall. Now, in terms of putting the grain on, the veining in that we see in marble, always do it on a diagonal. And you want to use this side of your pencil because there's a little bit of a miasma that occurs. Now it's not going to look like marble yet. We have to wait until we get the pencil in. Now you have these areas of miasma, and then you have some sharp veins. But this isn't sitting on the surface. It's below layers of translucency. So what gives it that effect is the wax from your white pencil crayon. So you go over this with your white pencil crayon, and it will then begin to look like, with the wax coating, it will begin to look like marble. So you can go along with the grain first of all, and then to fill the paper a little better, you go the opposite way. And underneath we can see some of the reflections, so that's nice too, that it's a little bit one level down. And then you can use your white gel pen or your white, this pen that I like. I find if you run them on your finger, it helps to get them back to life. They tend to dry out at the end, but you can drop some highlights down. And this is kind of, you can maybe wiggle them a little bit on. And you can also use your pencil if you find they're all the same or they're too light. You can use your finger, you can use your finger to soften some of them. And you do the same thing on all of these. And don't make them all the same though. Put a little less, a little more. Just roll your pencil in your fingers and you'll get some veining. And then again, you use your white pencil to blend the veining, go in the direction of the veining. And then you stop, you have to stop and ask, do they give me what I want? Are they giving me what I want? Are they getting darker? Now, to apply that to the surface itself, this is your light side, and the hatching, where you have hatching, is of course your shadow side. So of course doing a little sample patch like that is always a little different than when you do it for real, but similar. So I'm going to start with my 1, and the 1 is going to, remember that the gray markers, now I don't want to go too far before I put my reflections in, because it'll dry on me, so I've got to get that in now. And if you wanted to leave some white, I don't think it would hurt to leave some white. You don't want it to look like stainless steel though, so that, now I used my 3 and my 5, you'll remember, on my edges, this edge, because this is our middle value edge. It's not really, well, it is a middle value edge. Okay, and this is our 5, and we'll put our 7 on here. Don't worry if you go out of your lines. You can always get those back with your white pencil later on, or put a thicker dark edge. So now we have our 3 values. And if it's dry, I can start to put my veining on. And this goes on at a diagonal. And your images are large enough that we'll see this. And my white pencil to put it underneath, to make it go underneath. And I can still see some of my, I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but I can still see some of those reflections that I put on to show that it's a polished marble. It's shiny. Now, granite is another one that you see quite often. It's gorgeous in the kitchen, so anywhere actually. But the way that I do that is to put some dots of white down. You have to let these dry. This can also be achieved with your white pencil. And I'll show you that in a second here. But I'm just putting down dots. Because you see all those light flecks in granite. Another way to do this is to use your white pencil and you twirl it. If you don't twirl it, the white won't grab. And I'm pressing, but you need it to grab, because when you put your marker over top, you want to be able to have those peep through. The reason though that we put it underneath like this is because it's not going to, it shouldn't look pure white. You see, I can see them. So that's what you're after. It's very subtle with the pencil crayon, but with the whiteout pen, it's going to be more pronounced. This is a relatively dark material, but I'm going to start with my 1 and put just to wet the paper, and then I'm going to put a lot more 3. So there'll be more 3 here. And you can see, I can see my dots popping through even just with the 1. And now I'll put more 3 than 1. And I'm always amazed at how far and how many values you can get out of one marker. So this is a very reflective surface, so you want to show vertical strokes. You apply this in vertical strokes after you have your What I'm not happy with though is that my strokes are too blended. This one, the highlights are really, really bright. It's very reflective, so I'm just going to go in and make that a little more dark. So I give you all these rules to follow here, but they're not really rules. You have to, as long as you have enough contrast between your light, your halftone, and your shadow, then how you get there and what exact markers you use, it really doesn't really matter that much. So this now is the 3. I'm not using any 1 at all. And again, I'm applying it with vertical strokes because I want to show reflections even in the shadows, the middle value side. Even there I want to show that it's a very shiny and reflective surface, and you try to spread it out so that these aren't all the same size. Now on the shadow side, this can be very dark because granite is a very dark material. Well, there are many types of granite, but the one I'm thinking of is very dark. So I'm going to start with the 5 in here now. And we can really see our dots. And I've got my 7, so I'm going to use my 7. And this is really, it's more 7 in the shadow than it ever would be any 5. Now they always dry a little lighter than you think, so you can go back and darken up some of these lines that you put in as reflections if you want to. Granite can be extremely dark, and if that's what you're trying to convey, then you might want to start with the halftone value as your light value, your shadow value as your middle value, and then when you do the shadow value, the true shadow value, use the black as well as the 7. So in the light, you'll be using 3, laying down 3, and then adding the reflections with 5. In the middle value, you'll be laying down 5 and putting your shadows in with 7. And in the true shadow, you'll be using 7 and laying down the darks and the reflected darks with a black marker.